All right, good evening. My name is Don Ficken, and I'm part of the Library Telescope Task Force, and it's great to have everybody join us tonight. This is our 37th program of the year, and I think I need to probably bring up the PowerPoint. 1 second, please. Let me go ahead and share that out. I'll make sure I'm doing that properly. So this is our 37th program of the year, or rather, since we've started a couple years ago, and it'll actually be the last program for this year. We're going to take a break in November and December, just with the holidays coming up. We just need to, every once in a while, to kind of sit back and just enjoy things for a while. So we've been fairly busy. But anyway, we're glad to have you. Tonight's program will be taking night sky photos using the library telescope. And I got my colleague here, Tom Lynch. He's our rock star Facebook guy. He's been really cranking up our Facebook followers. So if you're not familiar with the library telescope program, it's been around since 2008. A group in New Hampshire started it, and they were kind enough to share their formula with the world, and it's taken off. It's over, we know of at least over 900 locations. We're getting actually pretty close to 1,000 locations. And I know there's at least 6 countries involved, and we've expanded to include binoculars. And if you go to our website, librarytelescope.org, you'll find there's a map that you can click on a country if it's highlighted, and you can drill down to a state or province or whatever else to find what we know of might be a listing of libraries that actually have the program and offering the program. So it's, and if your library, by the way, is in the program and it's not on that list, just let us know, and we'll be happy to get involved. So our objective with our task force is simply to grow the program and share best practices. We get together once a month, a bunch of us. So there's a lot of clubs now involved, not only in just the US, but in other countries. We have a Facebook page that really is a wonderful thing. Tom has been growing that. He jumped, I think, 1,000 followers over the last month. Like I say, that's why I'm calling him the rock star. And if you go to our website, not only do we have that map that I talked about, participating libraries, but we have a really lot of resources. We've been doing a lot of fun stuff. For example, printing 3D, making 3D parts to fix the telescopes that we're using. We've got books you can download and adapt, user manuals, and we've got instructions and things like that. And so it's a really good resource. And of course, if you're actually working on a program, managing a program, we'd love to have you join our task force. And you can do that by just contacting us through our webpage. Each month, we have a library, we have the Astronomical League will share with us various sky charts. These are typically in English, and many of them there's also in Spanish. So it's a nice resource that's provided to us. And we put that on the front page of our librarytelescope.org website. So if you would like to download and print those, they're free, obviously, to use. It gives you a lot of great objects each month to take a look at. And usually our friend that does this for us will highlight some with special maps, some particularly kind of fun things for the month to really consider going outside and take a look at. All right, so we've been doing this program for these videos or webinars for quite a while. Last month, we had a program of pocket planetariums. Obviously, you can certainly get an old-fashioned planetarium out and just planisphere out and do some things, but there's a lot of apps that are really good out there. And so we had a great program on that. Tonight, we're doing taking night sky photos using the library telescope, which I'll start in just a minute. But if you look back, there's so many different topics over the course of the last several years. We've done everything from programs in schools, storytelling in the skies, eclipses, International Observe the Moon Night, libraries talking about what they do. There's just a lot of good stuff. So I encourage you to visit the front page of librarytelescope.org or poke around the Facebook, because all this stuff's been posted out to Facebook, and you'll find these things. And I think you'll find there's probably something of interest somewhere there, no matter whether you're a patron or a library wanting to launch the program, or an amateur astronomer clubs, or amateur astronomer yourself, just interested in maybe learning more about the library telescope program. Again, our website is librarytelescope.org. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/library telescope. All right, so we'll our typical approach here is that we'll go ahead and do our presentation, and then when we get to the end of that, if you're on Zoom, we do have a few people on Zoom here tonight with us. I encourage the people on Zoom just to put it in our little chat area, and if you're on Facebook, just put it in the comments area. We'll try to answer the questions at the end. Again, this is being recorded, so we will be posting this within a day or so out to our front page of our librarytelescope.org page. And of course, it'll already be on Facebook for basically watching. Okay, so let me bring up the PowerPoint for the actual presentation in just one moment. We'll get started. And of course, I start in the wrong spot. That's okay. We'll get that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I decided basically tonight to do this program myself. I've been inviting a lot of folks over time, but I've had a lot of fun with, I do a lot of programs, a lot of outreach programs, and we do this at libraries, we do this in parks, we do these at observatories, and I do this with different kinds of telescopes. But tonight, what I'm really going to focus on is really pretty much the library telescope, and particularly at a library telescope star party. And so let me just go over here. I've developed a pretty simple formula, and I'll say that this is really adapted a little bit more to somebody that's really been doing programs for a while, but it's very simple. You take a telescope like a library telescope. I mean, you're all familiar with this. I'm going to presume, by the way, that you know at least what the basic library telescope looks like and how it works. You take, in my case, I'm using a camera adapter. I'll tell you why I use this particular kind. And if you put those two together, you can pretty much get a nice shot of the moon. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's not my best shot of the moon at all. I've been doing this so long, I realized I don't even have a copy of the moon that I've been taking photos of, because the patrons always get to keep their own. It's their own mobile phone. And all I do is just maybe make one quick shot to show them. And I don't even focus it that well, to show them how it works. And that's one of the photos that I took that really isn't even that really good. But it's really quite amazing with the capabilities. And some of the phones, they are taking tremendously great photos. It's quite amazing to me what they can really do. All right, so as I was mentioning, this presentation tonight, it's really more of just a little bit more of an advanced topic. Although I think if you are starting out and you just want to play around and try to do what I'm doing, you can do it probably pretty good. But it's really in more of an advanced topic, and I'm targeting someone that's actually hosting a star party, maybe an amateur astronomer's involved, and if they've got the telescope and they're going to do this. I'm thinking about a long line of people. This is very common. I will get as soon as they start realizing we can take a photo of something. They're lining up and they want to get their mobile phone on that eyepiece and they want to do something really fun. So it's really kind of thinking that this is a production kind of thing where it's not just one person spending an hour with them trying to figure it out. It's really like every 3 minutes you're cranking somebody through the line to give them something really amazing to take back with them. Again, I'm using the standard library telescope simply because it's really what most of us really have. Although I'd use my refractor, I've used my actually very large reflector telescope. And this is going to really reflect my personal approach. We could probably there's probably 1,000 approaches out there. If there's 1,000 people, each one will be different. And I'm going to focus on the moon because it's going to be an easy target for really everybody to do. And there are other possibilities certainly, but this is really just the content because we only got basically 20 minutes or so to go through this. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to cover tonight is really several things. The first is just the event timing. You got to get this right to be able to really make it really work well. And I'm going to talk about the equipment used, and that's a telescope, and of course the particular adapter that I like. I'll take you step by step what I do, and then over the time, because I've done so many of these, I've learned that you're just going to get problems. You're going to have something happen that you didn't expect, and you can't figure out what it is. And that part of that comes with there's different kinds of phones out there. There's different kind of light situations. The moon's at different brightnesses. There's just all kinds of little stuff. And over the time, I pretty much worked through almost all of it. And that means that I can stay productive. I can do 10 or 20 people a night doing some photos. And then I'll give you a few other thoughts, and I'm sure there's going to be some questions about some other targets besides the moon. We could talk about that just briefly. Okay, so let's talk about event timing. So when I do a library program, I very purposely require the library to schedule the program between a few days after new moon through full moon. And the reason I do that is because, first off, you're at a library, it could be terrible light pollution. You could also walk outside and there's clouds, or at least some clouds. And the moon at different phases will be enough to punch through, so that if a person, a patron, can walk outside and put this on a tabletop and they can get on the moon, even if there's some clouds, they're going to be absolutely stunned. They're going to love it. And they're going to love really the whole process of just doing that. And as amateur astronomers, we go, okay, Jan, it's no fun to look at the moon. We still like to look at Saturn and Jupiter, but we have some people say, I won't even look at the moon. That's just, I'm bored by that. But for a person that's never looked through a telescope, they are absolutely crazy. So if you look over the next month, the new moon this month was October 14th. The first quarter is at October 22nd, and the full moon is October 29th. And then we'll go into next month when we get our third quarter moon. So once you get past the full moon, all the way up, from a few days after new moon to full moon, that moon will be up early, even before the sun sets. So even if you had a program where the sun was relatively late, you can still go outside with that telescope, and it'll be a blue sky behind it, but you can still see the moon, you can get it on it. And so that's the reason that I particularly picked that. And you can get this, obviously, the phases of the moon are available in all kinds of calendars out there. You guys can look it up just as easily as I do. But again, a few days after new moon through full moon is when I typically schedule that. And I don't do anything from full moon, after full moon, all the way up to new moon, because the moon's just up too late. And if you get it in the right place, you can go get some very cool objects. But again, I'm working usually from a library that's in a light polluted area with lots of issues there. Okay. So here's the equipment that I use. The first is I simply use a library telescope. The modifications are very typical. It could be a Zummel, it could be a Orion, but it's going to be a telescope. It's going to have likely a zoom lens on it. In this case, it's an 8 to 24 celestron equivalent, or celestron itself, something that'll zoom a little bit. And we've got a red dot finder on this, and I've got other kind of finders that we're using. But basically, this is the simple formula. Very simple, it's very stable, and it's rock solid when you start dealing with any kinds of phones or anything like that. It'll work out pretty well. Okay, the second thing is that I use, because I'm doing such a large line of people, I use the Celestron Next YZ. Now, I'm not trying to sell that, but what I found is that there's other adapters that work pretty good, but they usually take too long. They don't have enough adjustments. So this could be a little frustrating when you first use the first couple of times, like, oh, wow, there's a lot of knobs on there. But what you find very quickly is that I can spread that thing out, have someone drop their phone in there, and I can move the phone toward the telescope or away from the telescope, and left and right, up and down. And I very quickly can center that thing on the eyepiece very fast. And the other ones, what I find is that if you get a lot of them, they'll have an adapter, and it'll work, but you got to spread it out by screwing it, and then you bring it in, you got to screw it back, and it takes a long time to do this. I can pull this thing apart and drop this thing in a matter of a few seconds, and I can drop it and make it work. And like I said, I've used some other ones, but at least for what I'm doing, this is a pretty good adapter. So let's go through how I do my approach. The first, of course, is just, this seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how often you get trapped. You need to set the telescope up for a good view of the moon. Now, just pretend you're going to be out there for a while. So if you've got a tree coming up, you want to try to get in a position where you're going to be out there, and that moon's going to track across the sky without any problems. It's not going to get in front of a building, in front of a tree, or anything like that. Because once you get a line of people and you get everything set up, you don't want to interrupt yourself and have to move the telescope. Now, I know that sounds simple, but I've been caught before by just having it just in the wrong spot. Okay, the second thing is you need to set the zoom lens, in this case, to 24 millimeter. And the reason I do that is I want the highest number of millimeter possibility to give us the widest field. When you're not looking through the eyepiece, that the moon's going to drift pretty quickly, and you want that wide field to be able to let the thing go across the eyepiece and to be able to center that. Because at some point, you're not going to be looking through the eyepiece anymore. You're going to be just trying to adjust it with the finder, and you really want that thing to be pretty forgiving. So you set your zoom lens to 24 millimeter, and there's an example there. I've got this set on 24 millimeter, and that's where you always want to start, and you're going to leave it at that setting the entire time through all the photography and everything. All right, so this is an important one. You need to line the finder to the view in the telescope. And what I mean by that, let's say that you were looking at the moon through your eyepiece and you want to center it. You need to make sure that if you go to the red dot finder, that red dot finder is a line to where that red dot is dead center on the moon. So when you're looking at the moon through the eyepiece, it's centered, and you're looking through the red dot finder, it's centered, or whatever kind of finder you have. The reason is that once you start taking photos, you're going to have a camera up against the eyepiece, and you can't look in there to adjust that that telescope. You're going to have to be looking at the red dot finder, and it could be that the patron's messing with it and it's a little off, and you can slightly move it by moving the red dot to the center, and it'll be centered, and you know it's working. It's just going to work that way. So it's really important to get that. And of course, you know, the red dot finder has an up and down and left and right adjustment that allows you to do that. And there's other kinds of finders that'll have basically the same type of capability, but it's an important step to remember to make that adjustment. All right, so this one is maybe not quite as intuitive as it seems, but what I do is I look into the viewpiece, the eyepiece, and I get the best visual focus I can. I want to make sure it's really as sharp as I can get it, and I'm not going to adjust it after that. I'm not going to, anything that I'm doing to focus after that will be with the phone itself. So I'm going to do a very good visual focus. And once I get it visually focused, I'm going to stop and just leave it there. That's what I've learned over time. So you want a wide field and a really good solid visual focus. All right, so this is where you want to attach. In this case, I'm attaching the camera adapter. The particular one that I'm using, you can see the clamp that I've got set there. It really will securely mount onto that eyepiece, because the last thing I want to do is have somebody drop their phone into this little adapter and that phone falls out. You know, maybe because it's loose. I want that on there, and I want it solid, and I'm going to really tighten it down good. And I'm going to tighten it down deep enough to where it's getting a really good grip on the eyepiece. Again, the eyepiece is a 24 millimeter. I'm clamping it tightly, and I want to make sure it's securely fastened. And I'll usually tug that a couple times to make sure it's really working good. All right, so take a photo. All right. So I would say with the adapter that I use, I would say probably 80 out of 100 times, maybe 90 out of 100 times, even if they have a protective case on there, it'll work. It's only when they get into the really big ones that there's a problem. You can see here, I'm pulling apart with my left hand. The adapter just pulls out, there's a little spring, and you can drop that in there. It's pretty forgiving. It's got a fairly deep well to put the phone into it. So occasionally they have to take it out. I really don't like them to take it out, because usually they fumble with it for a while, and it really can hold my line up. But there's only been a few cases where it's like almost like a bulletproof casing kind of thing that they have on it, where it really won't work. Now, the phones that I've used, people come up with old phones, Android phones, iPhones, everything seems to work on this. You're not going to use an iPad, of course, but you're going to be able to get most mobile phones in that. And this adapter will make an adjustment, the appropriate adjustment, to really make it work once you get the phone in there. All right, so before I stick the actual, once I'm at this point, you believe it or not, I go back and double check, because I can still look through the eyepiece at this point. I'm going to double check to make sure that the telescope is in focus. I want to make sure, because, and also that the moon is centered on the eyepiece, because I still have one last chance before I start dropping phones in there to make sure it's really centered. So that's what I do, is I make sure that before I put the actual adapter, phone into the adapter, I want to make sure it's actually centered really well, and I want to make sure that red dot finder is really working. It's good and clear focus, because at this point, I'm going to probably have a phone on it from that point on. I won't get to look through that eyepiece again until we're done with 20 or 30 people. All right, so I insert the mobile phone into the adapter. Again, just pull it apart. What I do is I pull the adapter apart, and I require the patron to put their phone into it. In other words, I'm going to have them hold it, because if they drop it, that's on them. But if I drop it, that's going to be a problem, especially if I'm trying to put it in there for them and spread that adapter apart. So I pull it apart, and I have my thumb down the bottom, so I'm sure it's getting seated in there. And then when they feel like it's seated, then I'll slip back the adapter on the left where it's tightened up, and then I'll make sure it's really good and solid and seated. A little tilt right there. You notice that I've got it a little tilted up too. So I want that to where it's not like horizontal. I want this a little bit tilted up to where there's a little bit of forgiveness as far as the way that the telescope is mounted. You can do that by adjusting the tube slightly to where you've got, it's a little bit more on a flat surface instead of just an up and right surface where it can fall out really easy to the ground. All right, so this is a little trick I've learned over time. Now, this is daytime, so this is not exactly what I would be doing. But one of the challenges is finding where the camera is. Almost all these phones, and particularly the new ones, they could have 4 or 5 camera holes. It's just crazy. So you're trying to figure out where is the camera hole. In this case, I'm using sunlight. I can turn on the camera and the camera will show me the eyepiece. And what I do is start making adjustments to the adapter until that eyepiece is centered. Okay. Now at night, what I do is I get a little pin light and I'll shine it behind the phone onto the zoom piece, or sometimes I'll actually put my hand into the tube with that light to where it reflects just like a moon might come through. And what I'm able to do is in the phone, I'm able to see that light and use the dials to center the camera onto the phone. And it doesn't make sense until you start doing it, but it really will speed up the process. Because otherwise you're really fishing around for quite a while to figure out where it is. And a bright light will help you find it really fast. If you're trying to use something dim, like a moon, maybe it's only a less than even a first quarter moon, it might be actually pretty difficult to find it. Not only that, but if turns out that you bumped your telescope, okay, and it's a little off, that light that you're doing there, you're going to be able to see that. But if the moon's a little off and it's not coming in the eyepiece and you're trying to center something that you can't even see the moon, you're going to be frustrated. So I always use some kind of light behind the phone to be able to see that eyepiece so I can center the camera itself. All right, so your temptation is once you get your phone up there and you start seeing the moon in there, probably it's out of focus, very possibly. Your temptation is to go back to the focuser knob and adjust the focuser. Don't do that. So what you need to do is, the first thing you need to do is make sure the moon in your phone is as small as you can. I want it really bright, really easy to find, and you're going to touch your focuser. In this case, there's usually a little box with a little sun type of thing on there. You touch in the middle of that box or where you want to focus it, and the phone will take care of the focusing. And then what you will do, see right there, the box. And then what you will do is you're probably going to have to use the little reduce the exposure thing to drag it down, because if you're into anything over a first quarter moon, it's going to be very bright. And it'll look like more of like a white bowl or white ball instead of a really moon. But if you reduce this exposure, all of a sudden you'll start seeing the surface of the moon come up and very clearly. And then, of course, you're going to snap a photo. Now, once I snap the photo, I can actually put my finger on the phone and let the patron do that. We can pinch it and make it bigger. So we're not going to turn the zoom lens to something more magnified. We're going to use the phone to pinch it bigger. And once we get it really pinched big, you can get, I mean, it's quite amazing what you can really get on this. We can even, sometimes I will move the telescope and I'll go around the edges and we'll take different photos of different edges. They'll love, different parts of it they really like to do. And if you get a little lost, you unpinch it and it'll make it smaller again. You can kind of move the telescope slightly to recenter the moon, but you can do really wonderful photos with this kind of thing. All right, so that sounds pretty straightforward until you actually start doing it, okay? The first thing that I would do is, if you've never done this before, I would just get a telescope out in the daytime and put it on a sign and do the stuff I've just talked about. You'd be surprised how much you'll learn by just doing that, trying to get it on a sign and be able to put your phone on there and move it around and get the focus to really work and all that. Follow the same formula. It'll really help you because you're going to feel like there's pressure. I will guarantee you that if you've got a group of people there and they realize they could take a photo through that telescope, you're going to have a long line. You're going to feel pressure, like, I got to really get this thing moving along. So you want to at least go through the process, through a practice session, if you will. And it will take you a little time to get used to the knobs on that one adapter. But once you kind of get used to it, you'll find, wow, I wish I would have done that forever like that. Okay, so this is the first big problem that you're going to run into. The moon is going to be too bright. And I will say that it varies based on the kind of phone you have. Some of the newer phones, their cameras are so good that once you get above a first quarter moon, it's going to blow it out. I mean, it's going to be really, really bright very quickly. So there's a couple of things you can do. The first thing is try, if you can get your program to be before a first quarter moon, or maybe through the first quarter moon, you're probably going to get a pretty good photo without the moon being too bright. But sometimes it's still too much. You can reduce the phone setting, which is what I did. I drag it down. Some of these you can drag them down really well, and they'll pull it down to a really good point where it'll still work. And that will depend on the phone that you have, and whether it's an older phone or newer phone or Android, iPhone, whatever else. And there's so many different models out there. You just have to kind of go with a general approach of what you're really planning to do. Believe it or not, if it's blowing out, what you can actually do is pinch and make the thing bigger, because what it does is it spreads the light out of the objects. In other words, the moon gets bigger and the light spreads out, and sometimes that'll make the features start showing up. You're simply enlarging it, you're making the light spread out a little bit, you're getting a little bit less light in the picture, and sometimes that by itself will work, depends on what phase that you're in, and of course, the kind of phone that you're using. I often will put the moon port back. In other words, there's most of our telescopes, at least in our Metro St. Louis area, we have a dust cap for the telescope, and we put a moon port in it. It's a little hole, a little plug that you could pull out. It's called the moon port for looking at the moon. And what it does is it will reduce the amount of light coming in the telescope. The idea is to be able visually to see the features, but it also works for a phone. So in other words, if you're putting the dust cap back on, pulling out the moon port, you'll have a little bit less light, and hopefully that can help you with your exposure a little bit. Sometimes I couldn't get it to work, but surprisingly, if you put it into video mode, put that most of the phones have a video mode, just let it do a video, and you'd be surprised. It'll actually sometimes adjust it automatically down to where it will just work. And so they can take a nice video and take screenshots of the video of different faces, and they'll get the same pictures, and they can actually have a really wonderful job of the video itself. In a rare case, I will actually pull the lens out and I'll put moon filters on the zoom lens itself, which we wouldn't want patrons to do that. But for what we're doing, sometimes you really have to. And sometimes I've even put 2 on there, because some of the phones are so sensitive that they will just blow out no matter what happens. If you get close to a full moon, I will have the moon port on there, and I will also have the filters on there to really dim it as much as possible. All right, so this is going to be a crazy one that I more recently experienced, is that as I'm pinching the phone to get the moon bigger, what'll happen, it'll switch cameras. It's like I'm getting really, really close, all of a sudden, boop, it's gone. Like, what happened to the actual image itself? Well, it turns out that it moved to a different camera, because that other camera is better for basically enlarging. So what I do basically is I go back to the same process. I say, let's just go with that. We'll leave it pinched big. I'm going to get my light back out, and I'm going to find out where that zoom lens is, and I'm going to recenter the camera, the adapter where the phone is on the camera, to the lens that it's on. Now, if you unpinch it, it'll go back to the original one. So what you have to do is you have to pinch it back to get to that camera to where it's using that zoom camera. And that will help you a little bit, because some of the phones were just going to automatically do that. It drives you a little crazy, but once you learn that it's just simply moving the camera hole, then you can simply move the phone through those little adapters to get it to where it's recentered on the zoom lens. And the other one that sometimes I just get caught, and I'm working with a long line of people. I'm doing everything and I can't find the darn moon. So that's when I go back and check the red dot finder and say, oh, that's why it's not on there now. I'm trying to find something in the sky that's moved, and so all I do is put the red dot finder or my adapter finder back on to where the moon is centered, and chances are it'll show right back up in the actual camera adapter itself. So those are some tricks that I've learned, and these are, I think if you get past these, most of these are really solve most of your big issues. In a rare case, I found that I actually need to adjust slightly the actual focus knobs to get a clear focus. Sometimes I can't quite get it to work, and I'm not sure if it's the phone itself or whatever else, but I make a little tweak, and it could be, maybe that I'm not getting the proper visual focus. You could have, if your eyes, based on where your eyes are, you might find that the focus isn't really quite right for the camera. It seems like it pretty much fixes it, but occasionally I do tweak a little bit the actual focus knobs themselves, but that's pretty rare. I haven't done that very many times in all the times that I've been doing this. Okay. A few other thoughts. I like to take, this is just me, I feel like the library telescope star party is to teach them how to use the telescope. And as much as I like imaging, if I only bring them in only image, then what's going to happen is that they're only going to learn the image. They're not going to actually learn to use the telescope, look at stuff in the sky. And I will put this at the end of the star party for that very reason. I will say, we'll do this later. If you guys or stick with me and you do the visual and you show me that you can use this, and we'll take some pictures of the moon with the cameras. And so that's one of the rules that I have. I feel strongly that if we just go straight to imaging, then you're really skipping an important part of the lesson, which is to educate them on how to actually use the telescope itself as a basis to even use other telescopes. I've only counted a few situations where a mobile phone will not work, and it's typical because the moon is simply too bright, and no matter what I do, I can't get it to work. And it's probably one of the newest phones, but sometimes it just really won't work. You just have to live with that. Strangely enough, older phones often work better. Their cameras are not quite as good, and they don't have as many portholes, and it's just simpler. It seems like it works. Even with the full moon, they'll just take a wonderful picture. And so it's oddly enough, the older phones sometimes work better for taking pictures than some of the newer ones. It could take maybe 3 to 5 minutes per patron. I can actually get it down to a couple, 3 minutes, and I'll give them a couple, 3 shots, but that's because I've been doing one after another. But if you do it right, they'll get a number of high quality photos. And I mean, they are giddy. They are walking away so excited, sharing that with Facebook and sharing that with social media, what they got. And they are walking away very, very happy campers. So what about images of other targets? Well, I think if you are trying to do something other than a moon, it's going to probably have to be a newer phone because they got better cameras. They're more sensitive. I have worked on things like Saturn and Jupiter and things like that, but they're very relatively faint and smaller targets, and it really takes some work, and it certainly will make the process more challenging in terms of time. So I think it's really something that I would not do unless you're really, really got a small group and you got a lot of time to mess with it. I have done it. You can get the rings of Saturn on those phones and things like that, but it usually takes a little bit better phones simply because they need more light gathering capability. All right, with that, I'm probably taking a little bit longer than I should have here, but anyway, got that. So if we've got some questions, just go ahead and put them in Facebook here, and let me see if I can go over there and see what we got, if there's any questions at all. If you have any questions, put them in the comments area or the chat area of the Zoom here. So. And again, we will have this out on YouTube pretty soon, next couple of days here, probably tomorrow, maybe sometime tomorrow or Friday, I guess. And so you'll be able to watch it again. Hopefully this will be some good advice for you. It has been a lot of fun, I will say, although at times it becomes like an all-consuming thing. That's all they want to do is take the pictures of the moon, with all their friends and share them and so forth. All right, doesn't look like we have any questions, so we're probably out of time. Tom, do you have anything you want to add here? You've been kind of watching some Facebook stuff and doing your thing here. You got anything to add before we break off? By the way, this is our last video for this year, until next year. So we appreciate everybody's participating with us this year. Tom?
Yeah, I think you got it pretty well covered.
Okay.
I don't have any questions on Facebook either, so.
All right, well, you guys have a great holiday coming up here, and thanks for listening into the Library Telescope program. Spread the word. Help Tom get 10,000 Facebook followers. He'd be pretty happy with that, I think. He's pretty happy with where he is right now, but he's always happy to get more. So, and feel free to check out the Library Telescope webpage. There's a lot of great stuff on there, and talk to your library. This is not a new concept anymore. It's been around a while. We've got over 200 telescopes in the Metro St. Louis area. We repair them, and we haven't, every one of them we've been able to repair any kind of issues, and they haven't been that many, but we've been able to repair. So it's not like it's that much risk in terms of a library getting involved, and it's very popular. We have large wait lists. We've added almost 40 telescopes, actually 41 telescopes this year into the Metro St. Louis area. The waiting list is still high, so I think it's something that you should consider. Well, have a great evening, folks, and once again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.